Good day, people of YouTube. What's going on? The name is AK, owner of eXtremeAzure Productions, and I'm here bringing you an X Talk video presentation. And today I want to talk about a topic that has been going around a lot in the gaming community, and that is that Nintendo is creating artificial demand for the Switch. Now, I've been hearing this and seeing this comment a lot with people saying that Nintendo is purposefully holding back supply of systems just to try and make it seem like the Switch really is super popular, and that they've done it in the past and they're just doing it again. But you know, this just doesn't make sense to me. I actually wrote an article about this over on enthusiast.gg, so you can go ahead and check that out, or you can just listen to what I'm about to say here in this X Talk. But my whole point is that wouldn't really make sense for Nintendo or any other for-profit company, and here's the reason. So over the past couple of days, we've been getting sales reports from Nintendo itself as to how the Switch is selling. As we know, as it's been covered thoroughly already, and I actually talked about it in my last video, Nintendo expected to sell 2 million units throughout the month of March of the Switch. That number ended up jumping up to 2.74 million units due to the fact that their expectations were shattered by consumer demand, so they ended up increasing their production rates just to get more systems out to people. And despite their efforts, many retailers are still out of stock. We see it every week. There are new shipments that are sent into places like Best Buy and Toys R Us and Walmart and GameStop. I'm talking about the US specifically here, and Amazon and other retailers, and then within like a day or less than a day, that stock is just gone, completely gone. And a lot of people are saying that Nintendo is purposefully only sending like a little bit of units. Like, okay, let's say this store gets 20, this store gets 50, this store gets 100. You know, they're purposefully sending out small numbers just so that stock can disappear and just so they can keep announcing that the Switch has been sold out. And people have accused Nintendo of this in the past with things like the NES Classic, which was just recently discontinued a few weeks ago, and Amiibo. Many Amiibo characters were very hard to find. Some of them were retailer exclusive, and others, the stock was just almost non-existent most of the time. And so Nintendo has been accused of this multiple times before in the past, and like with the Wii, for example, that they just are trying their best to make it seem like everybody in the world wants their products, and the only way to do that is to purposefully hold back units. They keep warehouses full of them and only send out just a little bit at a time, just to make sure that they stay sold out. But you know, as good as that sounds on paper, that doesn't really make much sense. And the reason is because Nintendo has investors to report to, as we just saw last week when they just had their investors briefing. Nintendo has to report to their investors, and when these investors see that their numbers aren't exactly as high as they would want it to be, it doesn't look good for Nintendo or any for-profit company. When you're trying to sell a product, you want to sell as much of your product as possible. So holding back supply just to create this artificial demand, it's a good PR stunt to an extent, but the cons kind of outweigh the pros here, because if you're holding back stock, that means less people are going to get a chance to buy them, and that can result in some people just losing interest because they can't seem to find this thing in stores, so they just lose interest and they go ahead and buy something else. And on top of that, even if people don't lose interest, depending on how deliberately constricted the supply is, that can result in low numbers. Like, let's say you could sell 1 million of something, but because you limit supply, only 500,000 of those are sold. Okay, that's 500,000 units that you sold, but 500,000 are still remaining, which means they're sitting up somewhere in some warehouse not making you any money. You've already spent the money to go ahead and create those products. Now you actually have to get them out there so you can, you know, make a profit. Companies can't make a profit if they're holding back supply of whatever product that they're selling. And in the case of Nintendo, yes, it is true to an extent that it could work for them in generating more interest because people will be more desperate to go out and buy it when they see it in stores, but it still doesn't really make much sense in the long run, because the less people that have a chance to buy it means the less units that are sold, which creates losses, and investors are not going to be happy when you see a system that isn't selling. as was the case with the Wii U, Nintendo produced a lot of Wii U's, and most of those Wii U's were just floating out there, you know, not doing anything. People weren't buying them. And that's why Nintendo initially set their expectations pretty conservatively for the Switch. Their initial expectations were 2 million units in March. That is what they started off with, and then when demand exceeded their expectations, that's when they jumped that up to 2.74 million units. On top of the fact that Nintendo had to increase production, you also have to look at the fact that they also reported that they actually used air freight to ship some of those extra units out. Air freight is one of the most expensive modes of transportation. If anyone who's flown on a plane knows that flying on a plane is always going to be, usually, in most cases, more expensive than going either by boat or by the road if it's possible. Like, it will take you a lot longer to, like, for example, to drive from New York to Florida. It's going to take you a lot longer. It's going to take you a few days to make that drive, or it's going to take a number of hours if you go by train. But if you were to take a plane, it'd only take about 4 or 5 hours, but it's going to be more expensive in the long run. Likewise, in the case of when things have to be shipped, when cargo has to be shipped, yes, of course you have air cargo, you have FedEx, UPS, and many other cargo airliners out there, but that is always the most expensive because that takes into account fuel, and there's also the fact that planes simply do not have as much space as, let's take for instance the most popular form of freight transportation, ships. You know, most things, clothes, toys, food, electronics, cars, are shipped on ships. That's why they call it shipping. Ships, cargo ships, are massive and they can carry a lot of things at once. The downside is that they take way longer. Like, okay, take for instance, if you were to ship something from Japan to San Francisco, California, right? A plane could make that trip in a couple of hours, right? A ship will make that trip in days, weeks. But despite the fact that the plane is going to get there much faster, it is going to be more expensive. Nintendo went ahead and used planes instead of ships just to get units off to retailers as quickly as possible. So that means they threw them together in the factory, sent them off to the harbor, the airport, loaded them onto the plane so that they could get out there within a matter of hours versus having to wait days or weeks. Does that sound like a company that is trying to purposefully constrain supply? I don't really think that would make sense. If Nintendo is trying to constrain supply, they would not pick the most expensive form of transportation to get units out to retailers. And there would be no reason for them to lie about this. And the fact that they had to increase production, remember that. So we have two factors already. They increased Switch production and they sent off units via planes instead of using ships. That's two things already. The third thing is that Nintendo has been advertising the Switch to high heaven. They've had billboards everywhere. They've ran TV ads everywhere. They had a Super Bowl ad before the system launched. They've been advertising the Switch like crazy. They've been wanting people to know what the Switch is. So why would they spend so much resources advertising the system if they didn't want to sell it? Huh? Why would you spend so much time advertising a system, so much money advertising any product, not just the system, but any product, if you were going to hold back supply? That does not make sense. Look at the iPhones. Every single year that a new iPhone drops, people line up outside of Apple stores to go ahead and buy it. Do you think Apple is constraining supply to make it seem like the iPhone is so popular? No. A lot of people want a new iPhone. So every single year, sometimes stores are sold out because that's just how many people buy them. And another thing that actually reminds me of another point I want to bring up is that, remember the time period that we're dealing with right now. The Switch has sold in March. It went on sale in March, the springtime. Most systems do not launch at this time of year. They always launch right before the holiday shopping, or should I say, within the middle of a really super active holiday shopping season. So they're almost guaranteed to sell out. And so they sell out between November and December, and then usually the companies then take January and February to make stock back up again so they can ship them out. So people can buy them again, starting again in the springtime. The Switch has launched in the springtime, the beginning of the springtime, going into the summer. So by the time we get to winter, the Switch will already be a few months old. So this actually works out because A, the Switch is sold out at what is usually the quietest time in the gaming industry. So that shows that it really is popular because people are running out there and buying them despite the fact that it's only March. It's not even November or December. It's March and the system sold out. Well, actually now it's not even March, it's May. And the system is still selling out. And this is still a very weird time of year. For the gaming industry is usually pretty quiet. Things don't usually kick up again until like late summer, going into the fall and then the winter. That's the biggest time, and yet the Switch is launched at the quietest time, and it is still sold out. So that's a good thing. So Nintendo can use the rest of this year before the big holiday shopping season when things really do get crazy to build that stock back up. So hopefully by then they'll be able to meet demand, and demand is just going to go through the roof come holiday season, as it usually is the case. Nintendo has been doing what it needs to do. It's been trying to get systems out there as quickly as possible. Like I said, they used airplanes, most expensive form of transportation. So all of this shows that Nintendo is really trying to get the Switch out there. It's advertising it like crazy. It's using the most expensive form of transportation to get units out to retailers as quickly as possible. It increased production, all right? Increased production rates. If you're increasing your production rates, that does not mean that you're constraining supply. That means you're trying to meet your demands as quickly as possible. All of this goes to show that anybody who believes that Nintendo is trying to hold Switches back doesn't make sense, because they're doing everything opposite of that. They're advertising it, they've increased production, they're transporting it on the most fastest but yet most expensive form of transportation, all to try and get units out. So at the end of the day, if anyone believes that Nintendo is sitting on warehouses full of Switch units, they're not. They're trying to sell their new system because it's just that popular. That is the bottom line. People are buying it quickly, more quickly than Nintendo can produce and ship them out. The Switch is just a legitimately popular item. That's the bottom line. And you could be the biggest Nintendo hater, but that is the reality. The Switch is a popular item. Sorry to tell you that, but yeah, that is the reality. Okay, so just think about that for a second. Just think about everything I said. Those three factors. They're advertising it like crazy. They're using planes to send units out. And they've increased production rates. All of that points to a product that is very much in demand, and Nintendo is trying its best to meet those demands. End of story. I actually want to thank Spawnwave. I think that's the name of his channel, Spawnwave. He's the one who kind of brought this to my attention, because he did a video on this, and when he said it, like, it just made so much sense that Nintendo is definitely trying to meet these demands. It's just been so popular that they haven't been able to do that properly. But now that you go over these factors, yeah, it really does make sense. So I'm gonna end the video here. Leave your comments down below. Tell me what you think, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.